All right, so we are continuing with writing end-to-end tests and debugging the end-to-end tests using Protractor. So the way I started with is the way you start writing your end-to-end tests is I just do I have Node installed, so you do npm install. I just do that. Then I'm doing the driver manager update. I'm not running these commands because it'll take time and I've already run them. So you do an update, and once you do that, you're all set. The first thing you do post that is to create your config file. What am I passing here? I'm passing the Selenium address. This is where your web driver, the Selenium, actually runs. This is the host application where it runs. And then I'm saying I want the browser to be Chrome. That is the base URL of my application, right? So that is the base URL of the application. And then I'm saying if you see any .spec.js file under the E-2-E folder anywhere, just take that and include them as part of all the tests that need to be run, right? So you can just do wildcards like that. And then there is an option here where you can say if you want to run your end-to-end test real fast, you can disable all animation, right? So you're just saying create that thing and then add it to your browser, right? That way no animations actually run inside your application and your so that's what your you can use that as part of your on prepare function, right? And then I have some Jasmine options here. Saying show me the colors. So your test fails will be shown in some kind of a maroonish color, whereas test pass will be shown in green. If your browser does not respond back in 30 seconds, remember this is the live browser. This is not like unit testing. You're not doing mocking of things. This is actually live. These calls are actually going over network and all those things. So you want to give a decent enough time here, but not too bad. You don't want to say wait for even 30 seconds is a long time. I mean, you don't want users to sit there for 30 seconds. So you can decide on this time. And then you're saying give me the verbose and give me verbose messages and include stack trace. That's what you're saying here. Just so I'm going to stop my application here and restart it fresh. I don't see my IIS running. I still don't see my IIS running. So I'm just going to do a hard close on that one. IIS close, IIS bring back. Okay. So now that I got my IIS back, I'm going back to my page here. I'm saying web driver manager start. So this is what starts my Selenium site. I'm just giving it a couple of minutes to start. Then okay, so web driver is started. So I'm just going to do Protractor. I'm going to do a conf.js here, right? That is the config file that I'm passing. I've installed Protractor globally, so I can just do this. I'm going to run my test. So this will actually bring up, so it's talking to the Selenium site, and then it brings up my browser, my application in the Chrome browser, and it's actually running end-to-end tests right now. So I've not sped this up. I've not asked it to run at that speed. It's just running at that speed. It's just doing the test at that speed. Right, so it's adding new items, it's clicking on buttons, it's adding data. You can simulate all of this and just see just see what speed it's running at, right? So I'm going to modify those existing data there, and then the test ends, and all my tests ran in 20 seconds, 27 or 28 seconds, 17 tests and 25 assertions, right? So it's telling me all of these tests that I've passed, right? So pretty fast, and you definitely can wait for 27 seconds to make sure that your application is actually doing what it's supposed to be doing. You know, the front end side, the live data talking to all the servers kind of thing. So let me just show you what kind of tests we ran on the page. So I'm going to this page here where it says checkbox gets unchecked if you enter an odd number. So I make it even, it gets checked, this checkbox I'm talking about, right? So you're just seeing that is the behavior that we actually tested, and let's see what kind of tests we ran on the front end there. End-to-end test. So it says E-2-E model binding.spec.js, so it follows that syntax, so that's why it gets included. All right, so first test. This is Jasmine. So if you're not aware of Jasmine tests, there are a lot of blogs and articles where you can get to know more about them. So what before it says is it's like your setup function that gets called once before each time your setup runs, right? Each time your test runs, not the setup, sorry. Each time before each time your test runs, it is these 8 functions are actually your tests. So before each of those, it runs this thing. So I provided, you saw me provide the base URL there. I'm going to pass the relative path of those with my page here, right? So I don't have to give the root path everywhere. And plus, when you start doing your builds, and if you're actually integrated these things with your build, so your local URL will be different, but it will be different in your testing and your data set and kind of environment. So you can modify just that one piece of information in the config file. So you can have a different config file for each different environment where this URL is different, but the rest of your URL, the actual page URL remains. So the test piece doesn't get touched anywhere, is what I want to say. Right, now let's see what the tests are doing. So it says it should have the correct page title and the header text color, right? So let's go back here. The header text is hello AngularJS, and when we see here it says browser is an extension that Protractor gives us. Browser says get title, and the title to be AngularJS, right? Hello AngularJS. So that's a test that's passing. And then it says get me the header text. If we go in here, and I'm going to do the element on that, so it has a class of header text. So I'm saying get me the header text, and then on that element do a get CSS value of background color, and that value should be that RGB color, right? This is what Chrome converts it to be, right? So it's that particular RGB. So you're actually doing end-to-end tests now. You're actually reading from the browser as to what is rendered on the browser. Next, it should select the checkbox for even number and uncheck it for odd number, right? This is exactly what this is the core scenario, core functionality of the page. What I'm doing here is I'm saying get me that element by model, right? So greeting.userEntry is the model of that, right here. So it says ng model of greeting.userEntry. So I'm saying get me that element, right? Do a clear, that is remove all the entries from remove all the text from that, and then send keys. There's the text that gets sent. You send it the value of 2, and then read the element or get the instance of the element for the checkbox. If I do an inspect of that, right? So the ID is cbox. So I just wanted to show you a different way of getting it. Here you can do it by CSS, you can do it by ID. There are a bunch of other things. I'll just show them to you. So you can get the instance of that element, and then say get attribute checked to be true. So if the attribute exists on the page is what you're checking, and then I'm doing a clear entry, clear on the user entry, and then I'm passing 23 there. So now the attribute checked should not be on the checkbox, right? So there you go. There you're doing your tests. I'll show you one more test before we go into the next aspect of it. Right. So this is another application here. This is kind of a full-fledged application. I've written a lot of tests for this application, right? So when I click on new here, right? So it should take me to the add recipe page. You see there are some functionalities here. It has to ensure that it keeps track of the number of ingredients that the user has entered. The save button should be disabled and gets enabled only if the title has some value. So those are some of the features, and when you actually do a save, it should take the user back to this view page, right? So this is what you've saved. When you edit, it should show the delete button, and actually when we go to this add page, and sorry, when you go back to the recipe list on the home page, it should show the newly added recipe, the one that we just added. Right? So let's look at what kind of test we have written to ensure all of those features are working intact. So this is a test for new recipes. I'm just giving it a title. I'm getting an instance of Protractor. We'll see why it is. Creating a placeholder for recipe count, and this is the new recipe we're going to add with the time local time string. And then it should show add recipe as the page title. So if we come back here, I click here. I'm doing the element. So you're seeing two H2 tags here, right? One of them is hidden, the other one is not. So when you come to a new recipe, it should show the add recipe title and not the edit one. So that's what we are going to check here. So I'm saying browser, go to that application. I'm keeping a track of the recipe count at this point because this is when the application started. At this point it's 1. There's only one element on one recipe on the page, right? And then I say click on the new recipe ID, right? The new recipe link, and that's basically what it does. So you do a click on that, and look at that. I'm not even telling it, I don't have to tell it to wait for Angular to load back the page, because this is actually talking to MVC application, which has the ASP.NET Cache as the temporary data storage place. Right? So I'm not even telling it to wait for the page to render. It takes care of all of those things automatically. And then I'm saying from the Protractor instance, find the elements of H2, and then it returns a promise for us. Yeah, the find element returns a promise. So I'm saying then on success, assign those H2 elements. We saw 2 H2 elements there. And then ensure that the first element is not displayed, right, while the second one is displayed. And that the first elements, sorry, the second element, H2 elements text should say add recipe, right? That's what the text should come back as, right? So that's kind of the test I've written. It should not show the delete button for the new recipe. So there is a new on the form. There is actually a delete button on the form. It should not show that, right? This is because this is a new recipe that I've added. So user has just clicked on the add new recipe button here. So the page is still the same, although the test is different. Right? Next, it should keep track of the ingredient count. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get I'm getting an instance of the add button. Add ingredients button, and I'm going to click it twice. So it had one instance already on the page. I'm going to click it 2 more times, and then for all of those ingredients, and now you're seeing that you can retrieve by repeater. So this is the actual repeater on the page, on the HTML page. Based on that repeater, it gets all the rows that are returned. Right? Again, our promise is returned. On the success, it says find the input of ingredient.amount, ingredient.amount units, and send respective values to them, right? And then once I fill in those 3 values, I'm getting a list of all the delete buttons. You see on the page, you saw that for each ingredient there is a corresponding delete button. I think I have to close this. Right. So there is a delete button. So what I'm saying here is get me a list of all those delete buttons and go to the last one and click. Right. So delete the last item from the page. And at that point, when you do ingredient count by repeater, you should get only 2 of them. So this is how specific you can write tests on. And then it should take the user to the view page after saving. So now at this point I'm adding all details. I'm adding some data to my title, my description, my instructions, and I'm clicking the primary button, which is the save button. And again, after that, I'm saying the current URL should contain view in it, right? Again, you don't see any wait for Angular kind of a thing. Most of it is taken care by Protractor. So these are returning promises. So promises wait till either success or the failure functions are executed. Next, it should show the newly added recipe in the list, right? So when you come back to the home page, I'm again doing by repeater. It says recipe in recipes, it gives back the rows, and I'm first saying that the row length should be more than the recipe count. This is the recipe count that we did in the beginning of the test, right? And then I'm saying it should be one more than that list. Sure, that is passing. And then I'm saying get me the text of the last element, and that should match the recipe name. Right? So saying like in the last row, go to the last row, find the element of the A tag, and then get the text of that A tag, and that should be the name of this recipe. Right? So this is how specific you can be when you're writing end-to-end tests, right? And you want to make sure that everything is working. The benefit of writing these tests is code confidence, right? So you write unit tests for the same exact reason, right? If your unit tests are passing, that kind of raises your code confidence, and the real test, not just the mock ones, your real tests are also passing. So I think I'm pretty good. Your number of defects that will come back to you in your system integration testing phase will be reduced by leaps and bounds if you start practicing doing end-to-end testing. And also you want to do Protractor because Angular scenario is kind of going away, right? Angular will not be maintaining that going forward. I think in the current version they still do. And by the way, I've been using 1.2.2 for all of this, but going forward those may change, right? So the scenario, Angular will stop doing scenarios, so Protractor is the way to go. And Protractor is really powerful. You saw how fast it ran the test. You saw how flexible it is. You can test in variety of ways. You can do you can pull out elements by inputs, by ID, by CSS, by bindings. You can do IDs and tag names. The options are just too many, right? So you can pull out, oh yeah, XPath as well. You can also do an XPath if you're having a very complicated XML. You can do an XPath, and then browser helps you there, right? So you can just do F12, and if you want to go to this specific thing, you just do right click and get the XPath. And I just want to show you that is what it comes back as, right? So that points you to the add recipe node. Okay, so that is how to do end-to-end testing. Now, one of the issues with doing these tests is debugging Protractor tests, right? Debugging your Angular applications debugging your Protractor tests, right? That's kind of well, as I mentioned above, mentioned earlier, so it's not an IDE supported thing, so you can just do F5 and start debugging. So it still has its own issue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the place where Node is Protractor is actually installed for me, and let me get the URL of one of the applications. Chapter 1 model binding, right? So I'm getting this. And here I'm going to say node bin / there is something called as an element explorer.js in your bin folder for wherever your node for your Protractor module is installed. And then all you have to do is pass the URL of the application that you want to test, right? So element explorer.js, and then the third parameter being the URL for the application that you're going to test. So when I run, again, your IIS is running, my web driver is still running, and at this point it just brings up that application and it waits, right? It's just stopped here. It's not actually testing anything. This is not for testing, this is just for debugging your application, especially when you want to write how do I write that expression to get me a particular value is what we are going to see here. So as it says here, you can do tab to see a list of locator strategies, or you can use list and then you can try list by binding, and it will give you all the bindings. So we'll do that later on, but first I'm just going to do tab, right? So these are all the options in which you can search. So I'm just going to do by class name. I'm going to say my same old header text, get text, right? So checkbox gets unchecked. So that is how you found out, right? So now you can use that if you're having difficulty writing your test and you're not able to get specific elements. So this is a playground for you to actually determine what it is that you need to pass to get the actual element, right? So that is one way. That is, so I just said element by class name, get to that one, and then give me the text. Right? If you're having difficulty in any of these things, you can use this as a debugging tool. Let me go down to, and that's the page, yes. So I can now say, I'm just going to tab because it fills me up some of the things. So I'm just going to, oh, sorry, I don't want to do this. I'm just doing list by binding. I'm not having to pass anything. I'm just doing an enter, and it gives me all the data that is actually bound, right? So here your paint parts, your $395 and $31, all of these things are bound. So this is what it returns back to me, right? So you can use this. You definitely want to be doing more with these things when you're writing your protractor test. This is how you can debug protractor test. I just have to do Control-C twice to get out of that mode, right? Protractor is really nice. The learning curve for Protractor was really small. You're only, I mean, if you're good at Jasmine tests, then you're almost good at, it's as good as you can start doing you can start writing the similar tests for Protractor. Some of the benefits of that is that Angular, so your Jasmine's expect function, right? So you're seeing these expect functions here. They have been patched in Protractor. They have been patched to accept promises, right? So all of these actually return promises. So when you say this, it returns a promise, and that promise, after it executes, the success or the failure is when this is called. So that patching has already happened. You just saw how you can debug Angular tests. And then the last part is you can also start writing these tests in .NET, right? So what I did, I'm just going to go with this file here, and what I did here is still opening. Okay, so I just did install package of Protractor, right? So I did Protractor, which will also do the WebDriver because Protractor is dependent on WebDriver. So the NuGet package installation is pretty straightforward. And then here is the test. So you can either run Firefox, Chrome, or IE. The only thing is the first time you write this line and you try to debug, it gives you an error saying one of the files is missing. It actually gives you the location of the file as well. So for Chrome, and I think even for Firefox, you require the Chrome driver, but for IE you require this IE driver server, and these have to be either in the set in the path of your environment, or you just copy them to the bin folder like I've done here, right? So every time the application builds, I've just modified the pre-build event to say copy the exes in the library to the target directory, right? So that's what you do. It actually tells you the path where you need to copy this, so I don't have to actually show that to you. Now what I've done here is I've started writing those tests, the exact same tests that we did for model binding. I've written them here, right? So moving on, I'm just going to do this test here. So my browser is up here. I am going to move this across. I'm going to bring this up here, right? So I'll just say navigate to that URL. So at this point you're seeing that it's empty here, and I'm going to say navigate to that URL. It is loading that page, right? So it's loaded that page, and then I'm saying we have go with exact same test that we did earlier, right? So the driver is your browser. The driver is the kind of the placeholder for what we call the browser in the test set. Right? So title should equal your hello Angular, and then I'm going to get the header element here by the same rules that we did earlier, the class name header text, and then I'm saying get me the CSS value of background color, and the BG color should be RGB of 0 to 55 to 55 1, right? So test passed. Next one, I'm going to say get me the input element. I'm doing this by ng by the input, which is greeting.userEntry, and then I'm going to do clear, send the keys, and at this point you should see 2 there, check the checkbox to be true. Your get attribute returns a string here, not the boolean. So that's the reason why that's one of the changes that you're seeing here. And then I'm going to clear it, and I'm going to send the keys of 23. Again, you see those values there, and you're seeing that the checkbox is not checked. And then I'm saying the get attribute should be null, right? And before I do, I just close and quit the browser, right? So now you're writing your Protractor tests, end-to-end tests, as part of your .NET application itself. There are ways of doing this in Java, in PHP, and all those things. But I just want to show it for C#. Right? Guys, that's pretty much what I had for this session. Hope you guys liked it, and I'll see if I can do more on some other advanced concepts of Angular. Thanks so much for your time.